Good evening, Yorktown, and welcome to the Town Board Work Session for May 11th, 2021. If you could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll rise and have Councilman Lachterman lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll have a brief moment of silence, keeping in our thoughts and prayers our frontliners and first responders. It is Police Week. We have a proclamation recognizing Police Week, so we say a special prayer for all those in law enforcement. We also say a special prayer for those in the military serving overseas, and we say a special prayer for those in Israel, where more violence has erupted in the Middle East. Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
Do quick introductions. Again, I hope everyone had a wonderful Mother's Day this Sunday, especially our friends Councilwoman Roker and our town clerk Diana Quast.
I did.
Excellent. Supervisor Matt Slater, joined by Councilman Vishnu Patel, Councilwoman Alice Roker, Councilman Tom Diana, and Councilman Ed Lachterman. We have also our town clerk Diana Quast. We have our highway superintendent Dave Paganelli on, as well as our town attorney Adam Rodriguez. We again want to thank everyone for their patience tonight. We are going to jump right into this agenda, and we're going to start with Rose Lenoff and Swarnov Pajari. Swarnov, again, is the chairman of the Climate Smart Communities Task Force, and Rose Lenoff is from Flow. She's got and we also, I see Sarah Wilson's joining us as well, which is great. Hey, Mike, how are you? Mike Matone.
Evening. Hey, Matt, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Doing good.
So we have Rose with us, and Swarnoff and Sarah. Again, Swarnoff and Sarah from the CSC Task Force, and Rose is from Flow. Rose, good evening. I'm sorry for being a bit late, but we appreciate your patience. You could unmute. That'd be fantastic. Rose, can you hear us?
Oh, I can hear you. Were you talking to me to unmute?
Yes, okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I was thinking, whose turn is it to unmute?
Sorry about that.
Wonderful. Good evening. I hope everybody is doing well. My name is Rose Lenoff, and I'm a project manager for a company called Flow. We design and manufacture electric vehicle charging stations. And if you've heard any of the news recently about some of the projects happening in New York City, Flow is behind the curbside charging station deployment. We're going to be installing about 100 charging stations curbside throughout the 5 boroughs. And our first installation is going to begin June 9th. And quickly afterwards, we're going to keep deploying in different boroughs. We're starting in the Bronx and expect to have installations wrapped up in just a couple of weeks. But we're very excited about the project. But separate from our work in throughout the 5 boroughs, as very brief background on Flow and who we are. Like I mentioned, we design and manufacture electric vehicle charging stations. We have the largest charging station network deployed throughout Canada and the 3rd largest network in the United States. And what we're really known for is having a robust network of stations for multiple types of users and experiences, whether that's single family home, curbside deployments, charging stations on highway corridors. But we work with municipalities, municipalities and utilities throughout the United States and Canada, and we're really known for providing robust utility grade charging stations that are purpose built, that are built to last and don't need a ton of babysitting. They are going to be in the ground and available for use many, many years later. That's really what our bread and butter is. A few months ago, I approached Supervisor Slater and a couple members of his staff asking about what the town's plans were as it pertained to EV charging stations. If they knew about different rebate opportunities and programs available throughout the state of New York, available throughout Westchester, and that's really when we started conversations. What we have done up to this point is Flo's team of researchers and developers identified a list of about 15 locations in Yorktown that were what we considered possible locations for charging stations. We met with Supervisor Slater and his team to review these locations and narrowed the list down to about 10. Over the past month and a half, we conducted site visits at these locations, and we narrowed the list down to an even smaller number to six locations out of that 15 that were viable for charging stations. We broke the list down one more time into locations that are in Con Ed territory and locations that are in NYSEG territory. And I'm here to talk to you tonight about the next step of the process, which is actually applying for different rebates that that Yorktown is entitled to and is available to the town, having locations in Con Ed territory that will offset the capital costs of the charging stations. There are two main programs. The first program is Con Edison's Power Ready program. This program will offset the costs of installing the charging stations up to 90%. Con Ed will come in after all of the documentation is in. They'll come in, they'll look at the site, and they'll let the site host know how much funding they're eligible for, and Con Ed will bring power to the site if there's not already adequate power. They'll make the site what's known as power ready. And you can speak more about this if you have more questions about it. There's another program called through NYSERDA, and that program offers a $4,000 rebate for charging stations per port. And that is another application process through the NYSERDA program. And both of these rebates are available to offset capital costs. So the two locations that we had identified as Con Ed territory is the Brian J. Slavin Aquatic Facility and the John C. Hart Memorial Library. And opening it up to the floor to get your thoughts on these two locations before any process was to be moved forward with applying.
Rose, if I can just jump in real quick. So for the board and for the public, we wanted to bring Rose forward since we're at the point now where we need to begin deciding if we want to apply for the rebates. That's why we wanted to bring her in and brief the board and the public as to the progress they've made. Just to clarify, rebates, when you talk about rebates, so that means that the town's going to spend the money first and then we get reimbursed on the back end, correct, Rose?
That's correct.
We're all clear on that. And we also talked, the reason why we picked the Con Ed first is because, again, Yorktown split in its utility service between Con Ed and NYSEG. Con Ed's program is a bit more advanced than NYSEG is at this point in time. But I can tell you that I've already spoken with NYSEG about it. I know that you were doing some research on your end as well in regards to their EV charging program. Con Ed's program, Rose, I think you already stated this, but it could be up to 90% of the cost, and then the NYSERDA portion, we believe, could actually cover the remaining costs based on the estimates that we've received from Rose and her team. I appeared before the Parks and Rec Commission on Thursday. I did brief them on the possibility of this going to the Slavin Center. They had no objections, which is good. And then, of course, the library as well as a viable option, especially when people are parking to go utilize our great services at the John C. Hart Library. They can park in an EV charging station, and they can be charging their car up while also obviously utilizing the services that are in the building. Rose, do you want to go through how the charges work? Meaning, we talked about how we set that up. So for an hour, it's $1 or however much it is.
Sure, absolutely. So the charging stations would belong to Yorktown. So any revenue generated from the stations, it would be collected by Flow and remitted back to the town on a quarterly basis. Typically, we keep 10% of that amount as managerial costs, just to cover fees that come up in that process. But we have a team at our Network Operations Center that would help Yorktown determine the optimal amount to charge end users to use the stations. You don't want to outbid them so that it would be so expensive that they wouldn't come to the station. So we work to find that optimal amount. And we can set the charging stations to be on a dynamic pricing schedule. So for instance, we could set the cost of the charging stations to go up every hour to encourage people to use the stations, but not encourage them to stay plugged in and leave it so that other members of the community can't access it. So for instance, we could charge them $1 an hour for the first hour. We could increase it to $2 for the second hour, $3 for the third hour, and et cetera. We could charge it. We could charge less. We could charge more. But that amount is something that we would work with you to determine.
Can I ask? Are there different types of EV stations, and the cost?
That's a great question, and there are. So the two main types of charging stations are what's known as level 2 station, and the second type is known as level 3. You can also call it a level 2 station or a DC fast charger, meaning a direct current fast charging station. What we're talking about for this project is a level 2 station, and that provides vehicles about 25 miles of range per hour plugged in. So it's not a station that necessarily you would go to if you had zero battery in your car, but it helps when people are planning on parking for maybe 45 minutes to 3 hours. It's a great place to park in that time so that you're getting more battery capacity as opposed to just sitting and not getting anything at that time. DC fast chargers are typically they're more expensive. The cost of electricity is more expensive. It's typically done either by kilowatt hour, kWh, or per minute, and typically you're charging maybe 20 cents per kWh or 25 cents per kWh. But the amount of energy that you're receiving from a DC fast charging station is significantly higher because it's the current, not to get too much into it, but the current is bypassing the brain of the vehicle and going right into the battery pack of the vehicle and just happening at a much faster rate.
What's the cost of the stations themselves?
The level 2 stations typically start around $1,800. And that's with Flow. DC fast chargers, it's going to cost you a little bit more because of the different technology. And that'll be about $28,000. But again, we're not talking about DC fast chargers for this project. We're focusing on level 2.
$28,000 for a fast charger?
That's correct.
Ooh. So now who does the maintenance on these should something happen to them?
Great question. And that's covered by Flow.
Okay.
So can I just say something to here? Hello?
Yes, Councilman Patel, please.
I don't see my picture, when I see that it's a small one. Anyway,
Oh, you're still here.
what I really want to ask you, is this like a 10-minute, half-hour job like that, So like, you drop off the kids, in a library and like that. But how do you know how much battery is already charged or full. People don't know. Do they have to educate themselves? Otherwise, whether they are just putting on a little bit current and the battery fully charged, and then, the next person coming in, they don't have a chance to get into that. And another question is, some places, if there is a fees to park the car, do you waive the parking fee? See, these are the two questions.
Great questions. I'll start with the first one first and then go to the second one. So if you're, imagine driving in an internal combustion engine and you have your speedometer, and next to your speedometer you have your gas tank, and there's a little dial that tells you when you need to fill up with gas, when you're full, when you're empty. It's the same with electric vehicles. It's right there in the front of the vehicle, and you can see what your battery capacity is. You can see if you need to charge. You can see what percentage your battery is at. It's similar to like an iPhone or Android, where you can look up in the corner of the phone and see how much battery you have. So it's not typical for somebody to pull up to a charging station and not know what their battery capacity is, because it's telling them right on their vehicle. Level 2 stations are typically stations where people are parked for longer periods of time. They're areas, Flow installs charging stations at these locations in, say, a commercial area, maybe near a shopping mall, where somebody's going to get out of their car, go shopping, come back. They'll be parked for some time. Like I mentioned before, in New York City, we do a lot of work with curbside, because again, people are parked in curbside locations, typically for 20 minutes or more. And there's a justification for charging at those locations. As it pertains to parking, our suggestion and what we have seen the best success with is continuing to bill people for parking, but having it separate from charging. So if you have a parking meter, you have to pay for the parking meter, and then you connect to the charging station, and those act as two separate entities, because it just ends up being a smoother transition for people who are paying for parking at those locations.
Right, but in both the locations that we've cited, we don't have that issue.
No. That's easy then.
Much easier, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, we don't have a meter issue in Yorktown at all.
Correct.
So what is it seems a little convoluted that, what's the incentive per se for the town? We don't underwrite gas stations. We don't supply gasoline. Now we're turning around and going into the business of these electric vehicle chargers, and it seems a little, I'm not sure if it's a governmental function.
Yeah, absolutely, and I completely respect that thought process. You're right. You could say it's not the responsibility of the town to provide these services, but it is the responsibility of the town to provide clean air and to provide a safe living environment for residents. And EV charging stations and electric vehicles in general help reduce the amount of carbon emissions that are in the air, because electric vehicles don't have a tailpipe, so they're not emitting any carbon emissions in that sense. And it's the concept of providing sustainable infrastructure is definitely being pushed by the state and by different organizations. And there's funding available for it right now. There's an incredible amount of rebate money that's available up to grabs for municipalities throughout the state of New York to provide these services. And I think it's a maybe esoteric question, a fundamental question that you've got to ask and come up with an answer to. Is it the responsibility of the town to provide clean infrastructure for residents? I'll leave that up to you to answer.
Right. So well, I'm more questioning, even the legality of it per se. Like I said, we don't do this with gas stations or anything else. We don't subsidize. So I'm not sure, where that stands. Maybe that's a question for a town attorney.
Rose, who pays for the electricity?
The town pays for the electricity, but that price can be passed on to end users. So it can be just passed through. So ultimately you would get the Con Ed bill every month, but that's what you're billing your customers for. So, so that it doesn't come out of your pocket.
So then if we're not paying, if it's set up so that we're not paying for the electricity, and if we get the rebates that we're not paying for the EV charging stations, then it's not really that we're subsidizing. We're just providing the opportunity and the technology for people to charge their own cars.
There you go. That's correct.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I think I'm not so sure subsidizing would be the word, as encouraging people to begin to reduce their carbon footprint. I think that as the town does that, and I think the state has, I don't know what the date that we have to reduce our carbon footprint by, but I think this is one of the ways that we do it.
No, well, Alice is someone, I have solar. I agree with reducing carbon footprint, but there's definitely some questions that came into mind.
I hear you.
One was actually even sent to me as well. So, while we're watching the meeting, so just want to make sure we take care of that.
Hey Rose, this is Swarnov. So from a CSE task force, and this kind of feeds into what you're also bringing up as a concern. I know the state, from a checklist perspective of getting the town certified, also issues points, but they require that the town actually owns these assets physically. So in this case, at least from the documentation I've seen, it does seem like we'll be the owners of these assets, even if we don't make any money on it, and pass the cost on, or even subsidize the cost of electricity. At least, and again, I'm not the lawyer here, so I think that's a better question for Adam. But at least from a checklist perspective, the state does seem in support that the towns should be the ones helping develop EV chargers. But then again, I can't do Adam's job on that perspective, but I can tell you what the checklist has on that front. But I do have a question for Rose on the side of how you're thinking through the different locations and such that you're trying to deploy in, because I saw there were a number of different locations. Obviously, we've kind of whittled it down to the library as one of the key locations and the Slavin Center. Is there a specific reasoning behind those? Is that because of cost? Is that because of available specific kind of power lines at those locations? What's restricting us from doing all of them and getting that 90% rebate? I think the state actually, and don't quote me on this part, but I believe there might be other additional incentives through the CSC.
Yeah, it just recently came
checklists.
out. That's correct. So those are all great questions. We have a research and development team that is dedicated to identifying locations for stations, and their process and what we've worked through with Yorktown so far is that they identified locations based on a number of criteria, including proximity to local businesses, proximity to pre-existing infrastructure, either level 2 stations or DC fast chargers, proximity to major thoroughfares, and a number of other factors that I'm happy to share with you off screen. We have a whole rating system that we've built into Excel where we rate the locations 1 through 5 based on a number of factors, and then it's out of a total score of 40. And the locations that rank highest are the locations that we discuss. I can read off of a list of all of the 6 locations that we had identified, not just the Con Ed locations, but the NYSEG locations as well. Locations for a later phase would be Yorktown, the Yorktown Museum, Yorktown Town Hall, Legacy Fields, and the Yorktown Police Department.
And the museum is the Cappellini Center, just for the board and our residents to clarify that.
So on top of that, then, I'd love to see what those criteria are. But that sounds good. On the other end, when it comes to the maintenance and O&M, because we're owning these, is there a separate maintenance contract that we're signing with Flow? Is the town paying out of pocket for that, or are these rebates that Con Ed and NYSEG and the state potentially might? Because obviously, if they're covering the entire infrastructure cost here, does the town have any responsibilities from a maintenance O&M perspective, from a capital perspective, or is Flow bearing that all into this initial expense?
That is included in the initial expense, and the cost of hardware, software, and maintenance would be covered by NYSERDA's program, for instance.
Okay.
Our program is as such where for the first year of the charging stations being installed, wherever they are, curbside, at a surface lot, in a garage, the first year of the charging stations being in the ground includes parts and labor. So if something happens to the charging stations, we take care of it. We're there. We have boots on the ground. I'm based in Brooklyn, but we have a whole team also based in the 5 boroughs to service the charging stations that we were about to deploy throughout New York. So servicing stations in Westchester is very easy for us, and we can be at the stations in a day, if not 2 days, if something happened to the stations. For every additional year, the stations the site host of the town could be able to purchase a warranty program, and the cost of the warranty program is $50 per year per station, and it can go up to 4 years. It's a total of 5 years for that parts and labor package. Like I mentioned, the first year is covered.
So then what's the expected lifespan or usability of these chargers that we're deploying if it's a 5-year max warranty?
So after the 5-year period, it can be extended. The lifespan for our level 2 stations is about 7 to 10 years. Depends on location. If it's right next to a highway, for instance, we find that because of all of the rattling and the movement that comes from the vehicles passing through the highway, the stations tend to depreciate slightly faster. So you might see maybe 5 to 6 years. I don't think that's something that we have to worry about for the locations we're talking about. With our DC fast chargers, our life expectancy is about, say, 5 to 7 years. So 5 to 9 for L2s, 5 to 7.
So let's play conservative and say it's 6 years for the level 2s then. And I don't have it right in front of me, but what was the total number of chargers between John C. Hart and the Slavin Center?
Go ahead.
6?
It was 6.
Okay, sweet. So then it's only $50 a month per charger if we wanted to cover that. $50 a month or $50 a year?
$50 a year.
Oh, $50 a year. Okay, so it's, I would say, I guess, negligible then. Okay. In terms of O&M. All right. Well, that was all the questions I have as of right now. Thank you.
I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Is there any bookkeeping town has to do? Because the controller, has to have all this software and like that, and she's good, but I don't know whether we're parallel to her,
That's a great question. And what we can do to make bookkeeping as easy as possible is we can include 5 years of software up front, and so have that cost be covered, again, as much of it as possible by different rebate programs. Our software costs $150 per station per year, just to be clear, and we can include that fee up front. And so instead of having to pay a yearly fee to Flow for software, it can just be done all at once, and then you don't have to worry about anything, and it's all taken care of, except for the quarterly checks that we would be sending back to you.
On a,
Send the
go ahead.
board some written information on Flow. Thank you.
As an all-in cost to the town, less the electricity for initial setup, software, etc., what would that be, ballpark,
How many locations are we looking at?
per location?
We have, I believe, sent quotes to the town before, and I can take a look at those. I want to give you information that's accurate based on concrete numbers that we've looked at, as opposed to just picking a number out of my head. But I can get back to you separate from this meeting to answer that question.
Okay, great.
Great.
Well, if we could also know the annual costs to upkeep as well. Rose, is it common to try to charge more for the electricity to try to cover these costs?
Typically, especially in Westchester, I have one municipality that wants to give free charging to their residents. I shouldn't say this because I don't think I'm not supporting it so much, but typically people charge residents and guests to use the station because it covers the cost of software. You can typically make enough money to cover, it shouldn't be an issue to make enough money to cover the cost of software for the station, and then your break even.
Sure.
I would imagine we need to at least do that, otherwise it becomes a gift of public funds.
Mm-hmm.
For the electricity. That's a decision for the town to make.
For the whole cost of everything. And that become, it does become an issue no matter what's on a state checklist.
I just wonder though, if the state's approving these, how do they approve them without questioning a gift of public funds?
And if we apply for the rebates and everything, our costs will be minimal, right?
That's correct.
Rose, would we be able to bury in the cost of the O&M or that warranty as well as the software cost into the upfront initial payment so that it would qualify against a rebate?
I don't see why not. I have worked on projects like this before, and NYSERDA's rebate covers the cost of hardware, software, and any extra installation fees that are not covered by Con Ed. In this
so
case.
We should be able to get our basis to like near zero on this project.
Correct.
Okay.
And I want to say, I can't guarantee that until you apply for the rebate, until you apply and see how much Con Edison is able to offer, you won't know until you have the numbers in front of you. And I don't want to mislead you with that. But my suggestion is to move forward with applying for the rebate and then making a decision if it's something that you want to move forward with after you have the concrete details in front of you.
And I think that's the whole point, though, of this conversation, is because that's where we are at, where we need to begin applying to figure out how much we would be covered by Con Ed and begin engaging NYSEG to see how much we'd be covered by NYSEG. So we didn't want to do that until we brought it forward to the town board to get the town board's input. And of course, the public's educate the public on what we're trying to accomplish. But there is a very real path that covers between the Con Ed portion. I'm just talking about the Con Ed, which is why we're starting in the Con Ed region with these two sites. There's a very real path where the Con Ed covers 90%, and NYSERDA would cover the balance of what was left over, and including potentially rolling in more of the fees that we would pay annually, dealing with them up front, so they would be a net zero for the town and the taxpayers, and it would only be a charge if you use the station.
Correct.
I know from a task force perspective, we'd definitely be in support of, and Sarah, feel free to chime in here as well. But I know from a task force perspective, we definitely support going ahead and trying to get those hard numbers, because if we can get EV chargers into our town for free, then I think it's a win for everyone here.
you know, the like I say, so this would have like a credit card type of thing on it, where you put a credit card in and say, okay, I'm going to charge my car for 3 hours, and then it just charges your credit card, whatever it is, 25 cents or $1 per kilowatt hour, and so on and so forth.
Similar to that, in the industry is moving forward in a way where we're not including credit card readers. If you've, which I'm sure you have, driven to like a gas station, for instance, the credit card readers are all covered by a and it's because credit card readers are very sensitive, and if water gets in them or if snow gets in them, it can cause them to malfunction. So the way of paying for a charging station session can be done a number of ways. The most common way that we see is that members will download the Flow app, and they will download it on iOS or Android, add their credit card information to the app, similar to, let's say, a Starbucks card, and pay for the session that way. If you don't have a Flow app, or if you don't want to download the Flow app, you can use, there's another company called ChargePoint. They are a publicly traded company. They have the largest network throughout the United States. They are Flow's equivalent in Canada. They have about 60% of the market share in the States, where we have over 60% of the market share in Canada. Or alternatively, there's another company called Greenlots. They're owned by Shell Oil. And you can initiate a session with any of those 3 apps. If you don't have a smartphone, don't want to deal with the apps, there's a number directly on the charging station. You can give that number a call, and you talk to an operator, and they'll it's a member of the Flow staff, our network operations team, and they will initiate the session for you remotely.
Yeah, to Ed's point, that was one of my questions, that so that it does not become a gift of public funds. I understand that if the town wants to put chargers up, per se, we can supply this like we supply a truck to plow the roads, per se, but the people have to pay to use it, and that, like they paid the taxes and so on and so forth. Okay.
Right, and I just want to go back, though, to be clear where we are in this process. This process requires funding to be approved by Con Ed. So we're not going to be able to figure out the cost to the town or what grants we need to go to apply for until we take the initial step. So we have the Con Ed incentive. You've got the NYSERDA incentive. We've got the Climate Smart Communities Task Force program, which also provides funding, a funding apparatus. I'm sure the what was the other one, Swarnoff, that I always forget the name of? What is this? It's not the Climate Smarts, that's CSC. What was the other one?
CEC. I don't remember what the acronym stands
Clean
for.
Energy Committees.
There we go.
I keep getting them intertwined. So we also have the Clean Energy Communities program that we can tap into as well. So I think the point, though, that I want to make sure we're clear on is we're trying to set this up so that there is no cost to the town, that any cost that we have to put out, we get covered by one of these many programs and incentives that are out there. And then that just allows the cost of electricity to be passed on to the end user. So there would not be a gift of, I don't foresee a gift of public funds issue in that scenario, but we'll check with our town attorney to be sure. The other thing that I think we need to make sure that we're clear on is the fact that we would have to go out to bid because of the cost of installing the chargers well exceed our procurement policy. So there is going to be a bidding process here that we're going to have to engage in. But again, we won't know for sure what the true cost will be until we begin engaging in these programs. And so the conversation really is to get us to the point where we can put in the necessary application to Con Ed to see what the cost or up to what percentage would they cover so that we know that going into the process.
Okay, Matt, I hear you, but I still would like to read something before I vote.
On Flow, yeah, but don't forget, that's 100%, but we're still going to have to put it out to bid because we're still going to exceed that, right? So whether it's Flow or one of their competitors, they're going to have an equal opportunity to bid on the project. My biggest focus and concern is the cost to install, to get the hardware and the software and the install. Can we cobble together enough of the incentives and rebates so that the cost is zero?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I agree.
So but that requires other legwork to occur above and beyond the bidding process.
Okay.
Did I say that right, Rose?
You did.
Okay. Just making sure.
So
Okay.
how many minimum, charging station, you can buy or rent or whatever, just for experimental purpose, I mean, this is good publicity for the town to be able to provide this service, just a minimum, and we want to make sure that we cannot lose the money. That's another thing,
I would say the minimum is one station, one location. I wouldn't encourage that though, because if you're going through all of the legwork to apply for these different rebate programs, you're bringing the electricity to the site. You bring more than one charging station, and I might say 1, 2, 3 stations, probably enough for right now, given where EV adoption is. But it's part of the reason why we're looking at multiple locations is that people travel, they drive, they go to different areas of town, and having infrastructure for them at these different locations is a benefit to drivers, to EV drivers, and to the overall community in helping move the agenda forward towards overall EV adoption.
Doesn't our solar project at Granite Knolls include 2 charging stations?
4.
Okay.
Nice.
Rose, where else are the stations in Westchester? The EV?
So we're working with a number of municipalities on this project. They're also early on in the stages of applying for funding and receiving funding. So in Westchester, on the public side, we have not installed stations. We work with a number of private developers, though, who own residential buildings and commercial sites, and are working with them to get stations in the ground. And we also sell our charging stations on Amazon and on our website. And so we have stations in the ground in single-family homes throughout Westchester for EV drivers.
Rose, can I just go back to something that on the process side, because I just want to make sure we're clear. So we said that the next step is to apply to Con Ed to figure out how much they would cover, right? But how? I just want to make sure, because I'm thinking about this out loud now. Maybe that's the problem. But how do we know how much they're covering? Does that make sense? So are they going to commit to like 90% regardless of the cost, or do we have to apply with a certain project already in mind?
That's a great question. And it's a multi-stage application process. So the first stage is to find the locations that you're interested in and apply to Con Ed. They have a few pieces of documentation that they require, spec sheets, cut sheets of the stations that you're considering installing. And that gets your name in the queue. And then in about 3 to 4 weeks, Con Ed gets back to you and gives you a preliminary letter of how much funding they would cover. 80%, 90%, but it's preliminary. At that point, you send in it's about 5 different documents, a 1-line diagram, cut sheets. You send in a pretty rudimentary drawing of the location, a site drawing, and a few other documents. And then that's when Con Ed will go to the site, and they'll conduct their own site visit. And that's when they come back to you and say, yes, we're going to keep the 90% and give you a 90% rebate off the program. Or they say, we're dropping that down to 80% because it's going to be really expensive for us. So now you have 80% off or 70% off. And it's at that point, that's the juncture where you say, yes, this is a program I want to move forward with because I can do the math and see how much I'm going to be paying out of pocket. Or you say, this is not something I'm interested in moving forward with, and it doesn't cost you anything, but you have more information.
I think that was an important process to explain, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree.
Matt, how many EV stations do we have backed by New York Pizza and Dunkin' Donuts there, the BJ's?
There are sworn off. I think it's what, 8?
Yeah, it's 8 Tesla chargers, I believe.
Right.
And Councilman Lachterman, that's one point. Those are all Tesla chargers.
Right, exactly.
So if you don't have a Tesla, if you have one of the many other kinds of electric vehicles, there is no place in Yorktown where you can currently charge your vehicle. I have to leave town and go to a neighboring community in order to charge my electric vehicle if I don't do it at my home.
Okay.
Very good. Thanks for the input on that. I didn't realize there was a difference.
I need it.
Yeah, I thought they were. Yeah, I was with you, Ed. I thought they were all the same. One plug fits all.
Yeah.
Make it proprietary.
So Tesla stations are proprietary. The stations that Flow would install are universal stations. Teslas have a specific adapter that works with Tesla charging stations, Tesla vehicles. The Teslas come equipped with an adapter that connects to the Tesla vehicle that makes them available to charge at any type of charging station. So it's really open to all types of vehicles.
You know, learning this and moving forward, maybe that's something that we should kind of enact. People want to put charging stations in our town. At least they should put charging stations that everybody can use.
Universal, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, just to have, I don't know how many Teslas are in
What
town.
if they wanted them on their on their parking area?
What's that, Alice?
What if they wanted to put the charging station, let's say they've got a carport. What if they wanted to put it at their carport? I don't think they'd want other people coming on their carport.
For single family homes, typically people don't want other people using their charging station,
Right,
like a
right.
stranger coming in. But with multi-unit residential buildings, we provide charging infrastructure for places like that, where it's open to the 250 or 100 residents of that building can use that charging station.
So, Matt,
I have one question.
I'm sorry, Councilman. I'm sorry, Councilman Patel. 1 second, Councilman Lachterman.
you may know the answer to this. There are those charging stations behind, but didn't BJ's originally put like 3 or 4 into their parking lot when they opened up? I think there's one almost by the gas station and one over by the Pet Supply Plus in the lot.
I'm not sure.
I don't recall off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I don't recall.
Do you ever see people charging there?
It's one of those things that I noticed them when they were there, but I don't really look at it.
Our goal is to install charging stations in places that are easily accessible and conveniently located. So places where people can get to, where it's not in the back of the building where they have to walk for 5 minutes to get to wherever they're trying to go. And that's part of the reason why we pick these locations, is because it's a part of people's everyday lives.
Sure.
And it makes it easier.
Councilman Patel, you had a question?
Yes, in Jersey City, you know, all the big new building, bigger than New York City. I've been there several times, and there are electric charging, you know, the parking as well as the meter. But sometimes the vehicles are not there and nobody charging it. And I got really mad. What the hell I'm doing over here? I'm running around to find the parking and I can't even park over there. Somebody can complain like that? You know, I mean, because, you know, the parking spot is empty, you know, and you cannot park the car unless you have electric vehicle, you know. So this is a kind of issue, you know, social issue, you know.
Right.
I'm well versed in the charging station landscape of Jersey City. I've installed curbside charging stations there, and in Flow has deployed charging stations in private developments in Jersey City. So we know about this problem very well, and it's part of the reason why we are starting small. We're not suggesting to install 10 charging stations at these locations and utilizing all of the parking spots for electric. Rather, start small, 1, 2, 3 stations, and then the rest are still for internal combustion engines. But as more of the population changes to EVs, we're anticipating the need for more electric vehicle charging station spots. But start small, grow with the community is really the way that we look at it.
Sure.
Any other questions for Rose? This is a great presentation, Rose. I really do appreciate the information. So then is the town board have, we're going to get some more information. I know that Councilwoman Roker requested some more information. But again, the idea was to be able to take that step with Con Ed so we could start that application process, because as you heard from Rose, it does take weeks on end until we get a preliminary, so we know at least what the cost of what they're going to cover could be. I guess the question that we're going to have to figure out from our town attorney standpoint is if the bid needs to be put out before we go to Con Ed. I think that's the question.
You know, I don't have a problem with taking this step because we're not guaranteeing Con Ed that we're going to do this. So
Right.
I don't have a problem with that.
Right, exactly. We're not at that juncture that Rose had described. But I think it's also important for us to have the bid put together so that we do know what the cost is going to be. So I just go back to our town attorney. Do you have any comments on that, Adam?
I don't know the answer to whether Con Ed has some sort of requirements, you know, that the vendor be selected before you apply for the rebates. I don't know the answer to that.
Rose, would you know that answer?
The question is, does a vendor have to be selected
Con Ed
before?
require a vendor to be selected before we apply?
Con Ed is agnostic in that process. They don't care either way.
Okay.
It's up to the discretion of the municipality and based on the local laws of that jurisdiction.
Okay. Well, Rose, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great night.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks, you too. You know, with all these the EV stuff that's coming out now, we're probably going to have to enact a law, a parking law that says no parking except for EV charging.
Totally.
You know, I mean, because people just be pulling in there and parking because they're convenient. You know,
Well, that's exactly what Councilman Patel was alluding to about Jersey City, because people just use those. They think it's regular parking spots, and it was one of the issues that the Parks and Rec Commission raised, was that they had a concern about losing, 2 parking spots up at the Slavin Aquatic Center.
Yeah.
In that regard, but yes, Councilman Diana, you're correct. Our next item we'll go on to is the Halleck's Mill Road traffic study. We have, and again, our apologies for running behind schedule. But we do have the Rich DeAndrea and Dr. Phil Greeley joining us, again from Colliers. And as a reminder, we also have our Highway Superintendent, Dave Paganelli. Dave, are you on?
I am.
Excellent.
I wouldn't miss it for the world.
I didn't think you would. Just as a reminder to the public and the board, this was an issue that was raised by well, I can tell you from my standpoint, this is an issue raised by one of our constituents. It had a courtesy of the floor regarding Mill Street and Halleck's Mill Road, not Mill Street, Halleck's Mill Road, and the cut-through traffic that goes through there. And so working with our highway superintendent and with the town board, we had Dr. Phil Greeley and Rich DeAndrea conduct a traffic study of that portion to see if we can institute any kind of remedy. And so this is the result of that study. And I'm going to turn it over to, it looks like Rich DeAndrea, who can walk us through the report that they put together for us.
Yeah, good evening. I think Phil's on also. You there, Phil?
Is Phil on?
Yep, I'm joining.
Yep.
Go ahead, Rich. You can start, Rich.
I'm sorry. Hey, Dr. Phil.
Dr. Phil.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey, Phil.
Good evening, guys.
Yeah, I'll give it a start, and Phil can fill in. So we took a look at the Halleck's Mill cut through issue that is a known ongoing thing that's been going on for a while there. We took a look at what the traffic volume information we had along Halleck's Mill Road. We collected some additional data there, getting the handle on how much traffic is actually using Halleck's Mill Road for cut throughs, and based on our analysis there, it looks like somewhere between 250 and 300 vehicles in peak hours are using using Halleck's Mill Road as a cut through, which is a significant amount for that roadway. So, and you know that's a function of, as I think we've talked before, a function of the some of the congestion at the Triangle intersection that they're trying to avoid, and the fact that it's also something like 1,500 feet less in distance that they have to travel to go through that by going along Halleck's Mill Road. So, you know, our study kind of went into what are some alternatives to addressing that cut through and trying to mitigate that and keep those people off of Halleck's Mill Road. And we came up with 5 different options that I think, you know, I can let Phil go through a little bit, and I'll share my screen if I can do that.
Okay.
Yep.
Some further information, right?
Great.
And just one thing while Rich is pulling that up, you know, in terms of, you know, the neighborhood traffic, when we talk about those 250 to 300 trips, that does include, you know, some of the neighborhood traffic that's utilizing the roadway itself,
Right.
but it's still a very significant amount of cut through traffic because, you know, if you look at that whole area off of Girard Court and Halleck's Mill and on Laurel Court and Hamlin, you know, you have maybe somewhere in the order of 40 homes. So if you're looking at on a peak hour basis, 40 trips, you know, we're still talking several hundred cars that are using this as a cut through. Okay. In terms of the options, and we've listed, I guess, a total of 6 options, and we've provided, you know, the pluses and minuses, the pros and cons of each of these options. And I'll just run through them very quickly. And, you know, I think you can digest and take into account some of the findings that we have in terms of, you know, how you want to proceed. But, you know, right now, today we have, you know, the speed humps along Halleck's Mill Road to try to help deter traffic from cutting through. We have the you know, the speed humps that are existing, and you know, one option would be to add, you know, an additional 1 or 2 of those, increase some signing to make sure that you know, other than deliveries, no commercial traffic. You know, we could sign this so that there's no commercial traffic. But I think, you know, the big thing is you're still going to have, you know, some cut through. I think the speed humps are a partial deterrent. I know, you know, some people in town that say, you know, they just don't use the cut through just because of that. But clearly people are still using it as a cut through. So that's, you know, really the simplest option, nothing too extreme. But will have probably little effect. The next option would be to look at clearly making Halleck's Mill either one-way eastbound, which would be option 2, and then option 3 would be making it westbound. So eastbound would be, you know, forcing traffic in the neighborhood also. So if you made it a one-way roadway throughout its length, traffic in the neighborhood would also have to, you know, go, if they were heading out to the east on Sawmill River Road, they would still have to, under option 2, would still have to go out onto Crom Pond Road out near the florist and then work their way back through town or work their way back through, you know, some other path to get back to the east. If we were going with option 3, which would be making it one way from 202 over to Ridge Street and out to Sawmill River Road, you would have the same effect that people in the neighborhood would also have to circulate around, you know, the block. Now, under each of these options, you're talking about at the Triangle intersection, the main signalized intersection. During the morning peak hour, you have somewhere in the order of 24 to 2,500 vehicles traveling through that intersection. And again, these are pre-COVID numbers from historical counts that we have. And in the afternoon rush hour, you have almost 3,000 vehicles in a 1 hour period traveling through the triangle intersection. So, any of these options where you would be making one ways, all or a portion of the traffic that's using Halleck's Mill would have to be absorbed either at that main intersection, or we would believe that, people may find some other, maybe not as good a cut through, but for example, if you were going from, that area over towards the high school, you could go up Ridge Street and come out at Elizabeth, if you were going, to the high school. Going back the other direction, you may not do that. So there's really, outside of this area, other potential diversions that could occur if you implemented any of these plans. So we started looking at other options that may not impact the neighborhood as much in terms of their trips, in and out of the neighborhood, that they don't have to circle all the way around to get back into their homes. And those options are, kind of a combined option where you would have a one-way section for a portion of the road. They could still be used possibly by emergency vehicles for sure. And if they were signed properly, could be used by buses, for school buses, so that we wouldn't have to divert all those. But again, if you do those types of partial closures, you would allow some of the localized trips to still be made without affecting everybody in the neighborhood. The problem is you would end up with some more traffic on Laurel Court and Hamlin Street potentially. And then we went to even a more extreme scenario, and you're going to have to digest these because every one of them has pros and cons in terms of cost implications, diverting traffic through the main intersection in town. And under the most extreme, you could be adding 10% increase in volume through that main intersection in town, which is without any improvements being done there, would not be a good thing. So under this alternate that we looked at was trying to keep the neighborhood intact in terms of flow to and from people's homes, but really with all the access being to Crampon Road. So under this scenario would be a partial, basically this one is a full closure of Halleck's Mill to the east of Laurel Court. And it would only be those few homes at the end, the eastern end of Halleck's Mill that would come, to and from their access via Ridge Street and Sawmill River Road. So every one of these scenarios even affects the neighborhood. Okay. So you could, reduce the amount of cut through traffic, but you're going to either increase some traffic on, for example, Laurel Court, or you may also require people in the neighborhood, especially like on Girard Court. If any of these are implemented, people there may have to circle around out onto Crampon Road even if they were destined to Somers, let's say. They would have to go out onto Crampon either through the main intersection or circle back, through Hamlin, depending on which of the options. So the one thing that I think is important, number one, is you want to get the input from the whole neighborhood. Typically what happens with these, and we've looked at these types of studies in other municipalities, and you want to really get it out there, let people digest it, see what the repercussions are before you act, okay? And many of these could also be done on a trial basis. So if the board digested it and got input from the neighborhood, you could actually, for example, do a partial closure or do, one way, or even try, closing it off completely as shown on this option, and see what happens. And it could be just a trial basis. And if everything, people are happy with it, so be it. And traffic doesn't back up all over the place. But I think, as I said the first time we, talked about this, no matter what you do in terms of any implementation other than, adding some additional traffic calming measures, which would just further slow down the speeds and maybe deter some people from using it as a cut through, you're going to have an effect on some other roadway. That's the bottom line. And I just, when you get a chance to go through this, because you're going to have to digest this, we tried to list all the series of pros and cons and all the different considerations. You're going to have to not only get input from the neighborhood, you're going to have to get input from emergency services, police, fire, from the school district in terms of the school buses and what it would do to that. Now, we pointed out that there are some options that it could be signed appropriately, that you could allow emergency vehicles and or school buses, but then that becomes an enforcement issue. That you would have to have, police enforcement of the signs because, some people are not going to obey them. Even people in the neighborhood may not obey them if it was signed just for emergency vehicles and school buses.
Oh, come on, Phil. Everybody obeys the signs. Come on.
And the speed limits too, Tommy.
And the speed limits.
Absolutely.
Let's not forget them.
Dr. Phil, is there any problem with eastbound cars on 35 turning into Halleck's Mills, or has that not really been an issue?
There are issues, because it backs up through the light at Baldwin. Sure. Okay. We never received all the accident data that was requested. The DOT is very far behind, but you could probably get some of that from the police department. But, there are fender benders there for sure. The people making the left turn onto Halleck's Mill in the peak hours, that you'll see it back up through the Baldwin signal.
But it's not a trying to cut traffic. It's more people that live up in that area, I would assume.
No. You're getting both. I mean, there's people that live there, but also it's the cut through traffic. So clearly, the more predominant cut through is cutting through, if you're coming from Somers, making the right turn and then the right turn onto Ridge Street and the quick left onto Halleck's Mill, and then cutting through to get either to Baldwin Road or points further to the west. But clearly, there are people that use it cut through going the other way. Although it is difficult to get out and make a left turn when you're over at that intersection, people still find it,
But you would be, unless you were coming out of Triangle, you'd be passing the 202 turn over by Cablevision to come down and turn on to Halleck's Mills. That doesn't really make sense.
No, but the traffic that's using the cut through is coming from either the west or from Baldwin Road. People heading towards Triangle, okay, which would be southbound, really, right, on that section of road. There's a heavy left turn movement onto Halleck's Mill Road. So they're cutting through to avoid the signal at the Triangle, and because of the shorter distance, even when they get over to Sawmill River Road, there making that left turn is not the easiest, but they feel they're saving time.
But you know what, Dr. Phil, that's the scariest because I've seen people nearly get clipped because they just come out at a certain point. They're tired of waiting.
It actually happened to me today. Right
Really?
at that intersection.
Can I just say something? I have lived there 48 years, okay? And number of cars are going up. But what has happened now is this e-delivery, business delivery. Every different shape, the car, the volume like that, and they just go where the GPS tell you, they don't tell you either one way or make it like that. So there are mucho problem, okay? And on top of that, we are planning, or will be or not, there are additional, housing, building or whatnot, So it is a difficult problem we have.
I think probably you'd have to close one end or the other, and somebody's going to be inconvenienced. I don't see any easy way to do this other than just saying, block it off. You're not going to have traffic one way or the other. One way, if you make it one way, either way, somebody's going to be mad. If you make it a closure at either end, somebody's going to be mad. If you make it go halfway and halfway, somebody's going to be mad. So this is one of those roads that, and the speed humps will keep some of the people out. That's about it. Maybe slow the traffic down a little bit.
I think this is a decision that we make in consultation with the people who live.
Yep.
But sorry, did we ask? I don't know, Councilman Diana. I think you mentioned it, but additional speed humps that wouldn't deter or fix the problem.
They already have 3.
Well, yeah, I think, Matt, that was the first option that we had was to put in 1 or 2 additional speed humps to make it more difficult and to cut down on the time savings that people are using. To also sign it for no commercial traffic.
Yeah.
Because you do have some landscaping trucks that are not servicing the areas that, the immediate area that use that as a cut through.
Yep.
And, I think that would deter some of the volume, but people are still going to find it, even with that,
even with
a faster route.
Okay.
So.
Well, let's.
I'd like to say I agree with Tommy. There is no easy solution to this. Everything has a cost associated with it, and particularly to the residents. And as we've discussed, we need to really get their input on it. When I paved the whole southern end, the question came up to double yellow lines, and I had the homeowners association send out a questionnaire, and one person wanted double yellow lines down on Spring Valley Road, Journey's End, those roads down there. So I think that really at the end of the day, it falls on the residents, because a big concern of mine is on a couple of these 6 solutions rather, there were definitely going to be increased traffic on Laurel Court, McBride, and Hamlin. And with the new development going up there, which will be accessing onto Hamlin as well, I think that that's something that everyone who lives there would want to avoid, in its entirety. We can't; those roads are just not geared. Particularly Hamlin is not geared to take that kind of traffic. But I appreciate the work. Like I said, I've been out there. I've seen the traffic come through. It's not a lot of deliveries. It is in the morning. It's people cutting through to get to Baldwin Road to get to the Taconic. And in the evening, it's people coming back using the same cut through to get out to Somers or wherever they're going. A part solution to the one way, if you were going to make it a one way from 202 out to Sawmill River Road, heading eastbound, would be a no left turn on 202. So as you come out of Baldwin Road, you couldn't make that left because that backs up traffic something fierce. People are driving, off the road there. You could see where they've worn down the side of the road. Sure. So, that's something that should be included in that particular one solution. So, thank you.
Well, I think what we have to do, I think what the board seems completely in agreement on, is we have to engage the residents of the neighborhood to take a temperature. I completely agree with Dr. Phil on that point. So maybe Highway Superintendent Paganelli, that's something that we can work with you on, and we can put together some type of packet or even hold a special meeting for them to explain this to them and then begin to gauge what their feedback is.
Yes, I think that's crucial. I think that's, they live there. That's
right.
And we do the same thing when we get requests for speed humps. We do the police report on it. What does it meet the criteria that the town has for speed humps? But then the final judgment falls on the neighborhood, and we poll them by putting a letter in their mailbox, ask them to let us know how they feel about speed humps. And there's not been one time where we didn't find that a silent majority was speaking. A vocal minority was speaking for the silent majority.
Right.
So
right.
that being said, you've got 4 people in a neighborhood of 100 people, and they want speed bumps, and the other people don't want them. So yes, I think if this is their neighborhood, they should be the ones to decide.
There's no doubt.
Totally.
That's great. Well, Doc,
it's been problematic for forever.
Well, only
then,
forever.
Stating the obvious, long term, and these are state highways that people are avoiding, is to get back after the state, and maybe now if they do get some money, they'll be able to do something to improve conditions. Now, for example, if people turning left into the Triangle Shopping Center or Maple Hill Road, at certain times, that'll back up. So it's not even just the signal. So at those locations, if there was a turn lane, then the through traffic would be able to get past. And, but it's not just the signalized main intersection. It's that section where people say, I don't want to deal with people stopping and turning in and out of there, uncontrolled. And long term, I think that's the other thing that could be done. But you clearly have to get the temperature of the neighborhood in total before you would do any of these. And my recommendation would be, even if after you get that and they choose one, do it on a trial basis. Dave, we could work with you to, how that could be done. It's almost like a temporary closure when you're doing them, like some of the bridge projects. You follow me?
Yeah, I was looking at the options, and a lot of them lended themselves to that sort of a temporary scenario where we could then judge the climate.
Yes. So, all righty.
Great.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody, stay well. Have a great night. Rich, anything else I missed?
You got it all.
Excellent.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for all your work. Appreciate it.
Good night now.
Thank you, sir.
Night.
Good night.
All right, next on the agenda, we have Ken Belfer of the Community Housing Board and Mike Matone. Mike, how are you doing over there? Good to see you back.
Evening. Hello, again.
We had John a little early before.
Hey, Michael. Where's Ken?
Good evening.
Ken's
I'm
right
here.
He's
There
there.
it is, Ken.
And we have Sarah Wilson, and I believe we have Sonia connecting probably. She was supposed to be on.
Yep. We're a bit behind. We apologize. So why don't we jump right into it, Ken? And
Okay.
And you explain to the board what the recommendation is from the Community Housing Board and why it's an important initiative.
Okay, so I'll just start by how this all came up. As you know, we have an affordable home that we were selling in Bridal Ridge. And in the course of showing that home, I realized that there were fill lines in the lawn on the side of the house. And there's a second affordable home that this one is adjacent to. And there's probably only 14 feet between the two homes. And there's another fill line whereby there are 2 underground oil tanks there that probably are only about 9 feet apart. In the course of looking at this one day, the neighbor in the other house came out and pointed out to me that some of the other homes, I guess many or all of the homes in this particular development were built with underground fuel oil storage tanks for their oil furnaces. I guess they did things differently 30 years ago than they would do today. And he pointed out a couple of houses where they were recently dug up and an above ground storage tank installed in their place. So I brought this back to the housing board as a concern. We came up with a proposal and passed a resolution at our April meeting. I just want to run through very briefly what we saw as the purpose and the three main points. The purpose was to preserve the affordability and protect the environment for the 9 affordable homes in Yorktown's affordable housing program. And the way to do that, we felt, was to reimburse the owner's actual reasonable and necessary costs for removal of underground fuel oil tanks to the extent they exist in any of the 9 homes, and replacement with above ground tanks. And the reimbursement would be up to a maximum of $5,000 per homeowner of their actual expenses. Second point, the removal would have to be done by a licensed contractor in compliance with all local, county, and state requirements and codes. And the third point is that the town of Yorktown and the homeowner would be additional insured for liability by the contractor for their work in doing the removal and replacement. So that's the core of what the housing board was proposing, and the source of funding to pay for this would be the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is funds that were paid in by developers 25, 30 yeers ago in lieu of providing affordable housing in their developments, when which was required back then. They were given an alternative to pay into a trust fund to support affordable housing in the town. So there's more than sufficient funds in the trust fund at present to cover this.
Right. Any questions from the town board?
No questions. The one thing to be wary of, if any of these tanks are leaking, it can cost you into the tens of thousands of dollars to remediate that soil and that particular ground area. One thing you may want to put into your contract or into your proposal that you send out is that you will want soil samples, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and pictures of the remediated area after the tank is pulled to make sure that you are fully covered.
Yeah, the money that's in the fund is to be used for affordable housing purposes. So,
hold on. I think Adam, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have an agreement with the homeowner. I mean, they'll. I mean, for all intents and purposes, we're going to have proof of this because the building department, they're going to have to apply for a permit, and I believe the building department actually inspects the work and signs off. So we're going to have that as a matter of course anyway. But yeah, it'll have to be done. And the county DOH will have to, if there's a spill, there's going to be a spill member. DC will have to be involved.
Sure.
And with these old tanks, the chance of a spill is pretty significant. And yes, the liability can be significant. But our involvement will only be as a funding source if we will have no. I mean, as far as I know, we've never been in the chain of title on this property. So we don't have any exposure in that regard.
So I just wanted to add one more thing to Tom in regard to your remarks, because we had a fourth item that really grew out of a prior discussion that I had with Supervisor Slater and Adam Rodriguez. And that fourth item was, in the event existing conditions require a larger expenditure, and by that I'm referring to the kind of situation you're referring to, Tom, if in a worst case scenario, and the homeowner is unable to make such expenditure, the homeowner may apply to the town for an additional reimbursement. Any such additional reimbursement approved will be in the form of a loan at 0.5% interest that will be a lien on the affordable home, subject to repayment of the principal balance and accrued interest on sale of the home.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be something that the homeowner would have to pay for monthly in this worst case scenario, but the town would retrieve the funds that were used from the trust fund in excess of $5,000 in that scenario.
Okay, I just want to, Adam, are we able to do that? Are we able to loan with interest?
No, I don't think so. It would have to, I think ultimately I have to think this through.
Yeah.
There's ways to achieve this result. But no, I think we're prohibited from providing loans.
Okay, that was just a couple thoughts, just because I kind of have some knowledge on that particular industry.
Yeah, if I may, one thing we did discuss was potentially finding a lending partner to assist in that endeavor, whether it be community credit, whether it be one of the CDFI lenders that deals in Westchester, whether it be a local financial institution here. But that would be likely be subject to terms of that lender.
Yeah. Kudos to you folks for wanting to get them out of the ground. What are the ages of these homes or the tanks are in the ground? Approximately year built.
So the ballpark, the two homes in Bridle Ridge, which is what brought this to our attention, are approximately 30 years old. The neighbor to this house indicated the tanks that have been replaced in the market rate homes thus far, none of them have shown any signs of leakage. So it's been a simple replacement. I think it's good that we're trying to get this done now and trying to find a way to encourage the homeowners to get it done, because I think it's like a ticking, time bomb in a way. In terms of the other units, the other 7 units, a couple of them I'm almost 100% sure don't have used fuel oil and therefore don't have any tanks. There's only one house was an older house that was resold through the program. That one on Stony Street, and I don't know if it has an underground fuel oil storage tank or not. The housing board would propose to administer this thing basically. We would send a letter to each of the 9 homeowners asking them if they have a tank, and if so, offering this grant program for reimbursement of up to $5,000.
The one that anything that's in the ground within the Vietnam War era are the ones that are suspect.
So the 60s.
The 60s, between the 60s, the late 60s or mid 60s to very early 70s. The steel was much thinner on them, and those are the ones I found that are generally leakers. But anyway, okay.
Any other questions from the town board? I think we just need to work through the process on that last point you brought up, Ken, just with Adam, so that we can make sure that we're on the same page with that and figure out if there's a different way that we can achieve what you're trying to obtain there. But I think otherwise we can move forward with a resolution at next week's town board meeting to institute the program, so you guys can begin that process.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay. And nothing else? Very good.
That's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Ken. All right, next we're going to go talk about our cement relining project. We're bringing Kenny Rundle, our water superintendent. And we've got Joe from Weston and Sampson with us. Hey, Joe.
Good evening. How are you?
We're running a little behind here.
That's quite all right.
Hey, Kenny. So this is I want to just, again, for the public's information and just to remind the board, This year, there was money set aside in the water department's budget to finally begin the cement relining that was identified for some trouble areas within town for our water pipes. So working with Kenny and Joe, we have come up with an updated work plan that I think they wanted to update the board on, and I think it's a great process so far. So I think we're making a lot of headway with this. Gentlemen, you want to take it over?
Sure. Good evening, folks. Once again, thanks for the time for letting us speak to the board tonight. We're going to try to keep it short and sweet. I know you're running a little bit behind and you have a busy agenda. But after some internal discussions and discussions with Joe from Weston and Sampson, who we've partnered with, we're thinking, so the board authorized us to do or recommended to do the cement relining, the cleaning of water mains on Strawberry Road for this year. So after discussions with the supervisor and Joe, we were thinking about when we go out to bid for Strawberry Road, I think it would make sense to factor in the work that we're going to do for 2020 or that we would like to do for 2022 next year, which would be Hanover Road, Front Street, and portion of Underhill Avenue. So that's kind of where we're at. We have a proposal that needs to be signed. The board, I believe, already approved it. And if you didn't, there's a resolution. So we have to sign the proposal. But so that's kind of where we're at, and wanted to put it in front of the board to try to get some feedback. And I'm going to ask Joe to jump in and give his input on it.
Sure. Thanks, Ken. Thank you for the board for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you guys again. As Ken mentioned, we've been having discussions about this. We know that there was some funds allocated for doing some work in this year. Based on the engineering report that we prepared, we identified Strawberry Road as the best candidate to fit the bill that should meet the price point that we're looking at. Discussing it with Supervisor Slater and Ken, work was anticipated for next year, and discussing the anticipated budget, we thought it made sense to do the most economical thing for the town and go through one bidding process, get one contractor that we're comfortable with that will do the work for this year, and then have them hold their price for next year. That way, you've got some savings on the engineering side. You're only going out to bid one time. You're reviewing one set of shop drawings instead of multiple shop drawings from multiple contractors. The overall plan was to bid Hanover, which is estimated to be $1.09 million right now from our report, which was based on some pricing that was done that was received, some bids that were received for a similar work in a nearby town. So we feel pretty good about those prices as they stand currently. Contractors might be more inclined to go and make sure they get their dance cards full for next year, so to speak, and get better pricing. And then the other intent was to get Underhill and Front Street listed as bid alternates, which would be bid out, and it would be an option for the board to select based on what the pricing came in at. So the contractor understands that this is an option at the town's discretion. So that was the intent for next year. What we're also seeing in the industry due to COVID and a number of supply chain issues is, you've probably heard, the price of steel, lumber, things like that are escalating at, astronomical rates. So anything that we can do to get a contractor to lock in a price now, I think is working in the town's best interest. So that's our proposed plan moving forward.
May I ask how you pick those streets?
Sure. So Strawberry Road, there's two issues going on Strawberry Road. Number one, it's a dead end water main. It's not in a loop in a continuous flow. It just comes to the end and stops. And number two, that pipe is very heavy tuberculated. So whenever there's a major draw down in Putnam Valley, because the Mill Pond subdivision and Putnam Valley High School are fed off of that one pipe that just goes down Strawberry Road. So whenever there's a big demand, we always get a lot of phone calls for discolored water.
Right.
And, so that's the area that we are experiencing issues from the residents, and they're making it very well known. So, again, we talked with Joe, and being that this is the first time that the district has done relining, probably since the mid to late 80s, it might be best to tackle a smaller section for the first project than as opposed to jumping in the center of Yorktown. So we figured, let's get our feet wet. We can work with the contractor. And if we like them, the contractor, they perform the way we're anticipating they will, then we just very confidently move into 2022 into town. So Hanover also, we've done maintenance, Alice, on Hanover Road, and the pipes they're very rusty on the inside.
I remember you saying that.
Right. So it's really a combination of how we find out which ones that are problem areas. It's residents calling. It's discovering these pipes doing work, just regular routine maintenance work. If we had a water main break, if we put a hydrant in. So it's my position that we should do. I'm recommending to the board that we do Strawberry Road, and then certainly in the beginning of the year for 22 to do Hanover Road, because Hanover Road, you have to remember that the feeds out, the water lines going out into Croton Heights, there's only 2 feeds, and that's one of them that goes in the back way. And then the other one goes down, through Front Street, right? And it goes up through McKeel and Trout Brook and all those up in there. So, it's just going to provide better water quality, better fire protection all around for the residents there.
And we selected Strawberry because it fit the available funds available for this year. And as Ken mentioned earlier, what we've worked out is that we're going to provide part-time inspection to reduce some fees. And Ken will work with the engineering department and his staff to provide full-time inspection reporting through our office so we can certify the installation. By attacking Strawberry this year, we'll be able to figure out, how that works in terms of coordination. And then we'll be able to address any pitfalls. If Ken feels he needs more support to attack Hanover next year, we can work out that plan for next year. So this is a good way to attack this project, in our opinion, to try to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand why you're working where you're going to work. Everybody would like to have their street redone, but I think you've made some wise decisions.
Well, thank you. And a lot of homework went into this kind of laying out our roadmap, right, on how we want to tackle the problems. So I'm confident, and I believe that Joe is confident as well, as with the work plan that we've kind of put together, and think it's the best for the residents and best for the town.
We used to do cement relining every year.
Absolutely.
And like you said, we haven't done it in
30 years.
Yeah, quite a while. Yeah. And since just talking about that, the cement relining, Alice, I remember having conversations with you at town board meetings, pleading that, I needed some support as the former water superintendent always had a consultant. And, with your advice and the board's permission and their guidance, I've partnered with Joe from Weston and Sampson, and these guys are fantastic and they're a pleasure to work with.
That's great.
And very smart too, I may add.
Kenny, praise Ken.
Kenny, the last people that did the actual cement relining, that was Creamer Company, wasn't it? That had done that many years ago.
Right, Tom. So there's, and I'm sure I'm going to forget one, but there's Kramer. They're a big player in the water main cleaning. There was a company called High Camp. They did a lot of work in Yorktown for years. There's another one I just don't, it's a bigger player too, and I just can't think of the company off the top of my head. But I really personally haven't been involved with the relining since Ed Newton left. So,
Right.
you know, I'm sure there's some new players, right, that do that type of work. But I know the older companies, the older veterans are still out there, the Kramers, and, you know, I see them doing work around different municipalities in the town of Cortland and such.
And as we get closer to this, you're going to explain to the residents what to expect during the cleaning process, where pipes are laid above ground, et cetera, hoses are run to the house and so forth, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would just make a recommendation to the board. Let's just say, you know, if we do decide to move forward with the Strawberry Road, you know, let's hold a meeting, and I'll come. Hopefully, at some point, I can come into the town hall and we can have the board meetings live, and because I'm not a master with Zoom, I'm trying to get it, but and explain to everybody. Just, you know, I'll do it at a work session. Just explain, you know, what's going to happen, what to expect, and you know, I would certainly also draw up a letter to the residents and hand deliver, you know, or make sure that the residents in that area that would be affected by this type of work certainly would be notified. I think it's something that needs to be done. I'm very proud and looking forward to taking on this challenge, and very excited to do this work. And I think it's a big job, and you know, it needs to be done, and it just shows the dedication that the board has to the infrastructure in Yorktown.
Well, this was something, Kenny, that we talked about that we knew we needed to get done. So it's a good work plan, a good 2-year plan, assuming that it all comes together, which I believe it will. And I agree with you when it comes to Strawberry. One of my questions for Strawberry Road is it going to affect the side streets off of Strawberry as well when you do it?
No, it should. So Strawberry Road, Supervisor, it's not all of Strawberry Road. It's from Foothill Street down to Lexington Avenue, down to the town line.
Right. So I agree, though. I think, you know, obviously a letter and maybe an informational meeting for the residents would be a great step. I think that it also would be helpful to remind people. I know you showed me some of the pipes in your office there. Why we're doing this. Why are we spending, you know, going to be millions of dollars, you know, when we're all said and done, to reline these water pipes. But when you see what the water pipes actually look like when your water's going through, I think the public is going to be thanking their lucky stars that we recognize this as a significant issue, and that we were trying to get back on track with that regular maintenance of our water infrastructure, because we want to make sure that the residents have clean water to drink. So I think that we should do one of those presentations as well, Ken.
Pictures.
Something here, guys. About time we are going to do it, and I want the Kenny to tell how many mileage. Always say that this is a requirement to get the water in your house, drinking water. It cannot be delivered by bottle. And that's why we are going to have to have done, because some of the federal regulation, the state, all the potable water we have to provide. And you can see those kids, and you show them here, it's like a worse than a clogged arteries, okay? And that's why it breaks it. So this is the wonderful start, you know, even though it is late, but we have to do it in order, because otherwise there is a fire, there is no water.
Don't have water.
Right.
You get up, you cannot flush the toilet, and you know, you want to cook. So this is really a good beginning, and I think we can work together and every year do something more, because there is a very large area in the town, you know, and you know, that's why the flow is not enough. And then it's not only these pipes, we have to worry about the tanks and everything else. So this was a good start, and I'm very happy about it.
So then, Joe, next steps, we're gonna make sure we'll pass the necessary resolutions to sign the paperwork next week, and then that would allow you to prepare the bid documents, and we get out to bid with this thing, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the way that the bid be formulated, it would be for Strawberry for the year 2021. Anticipating in the fall, we like to do it Like to be able to have the contractor be ready to go early fall. That way irrigation is typically minimized at that point, but we're before you get to snowfall because pipe will have to be laid over ground during that time. And then for 2022, Hanover will be the base bid, and then Underhill and Front Street, they're contiguous streets, at least according, per the water mapping, would be split out as bid alternates, and the town, based on available funds, will be able to select one or both of those projects, or none of those projects. So that's the plan moving forward. And then there are a number of other streets that are still within the design package that could be constructed over the next few years based on available funds and the town's availability to perform those projects.
And the other thing that we've talked about before is this is going to help the LaBerge Group, who's putting together the CFA, the Consolidated Funding Application, has been authorized by the state of New York, so that's being put together as well. So this is going to help us try to generate some additional grant money from the state to help offset the costs, so we can move this project along even faster. So I think it's Kenny, well done, Joe, well done. Let's get it moving.
Sure. And to that end, the one question I would have is, are you anticipating grant funding being applied towards this project or financing through the EFC, for example, because there are specific bidding documents that need to be included if funding is going to be required for
not for the
contractors and things.
Not for Strawberry Road, right?
Not for Strawberry Road, no.
Okay. But since we're going out to 2022, that's something that we'll need to keep in mind.
Okay.
Otherwise, we would need to modify the contract documents. If we get a contractor that is not using DBE firms,
right,
that would cause contractual issues. So,
well, I think we
consider.
I think the goal is to have some funding secured for 22.
Mm-hmm.
So I think knowing that is important for you.
Yep.
But Strawberry Road in 2021 in this year's project,
Sure.
we will not have any state assistance in that, but we are hopeful and working towards that for next year.
Fantastic.
And the years following.
I just want to thank Joe too, because this required his kind of company to do this. I think I can't remember how many times Kenny has asked to do this,
right,
and wanted a company to work with him. This is one of the best things we're doing.
Yep.
Yeah. It was a shame his predecessor used that money that was put aside for that as his personal piggy bank to do other things that weren't as important as this. Thank you, Kenny, for being front-sighted on this.
Yeah.
No problem. And I'd like to thank the board for their continued support. But the one thing I would just like to ask Joe, just to kind of touch on for the board, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go out to bid for Strawberry Road, when all the paper documents are prepared and signed off on, so then we're going to bid on Strawberry Road, and then we're going to lock in for 2022 Hanover and Front and Underhill as a bid alternate.
Right.
I'd just like you to explain to the board and clarification for myself as far as the town's obligations for the work for 2022. So let's just say we get the bids come back and say, okay, we're going to go forward. We're just going to do Hanover Street. So that's really has to be guaranteed. Does that have to be guaranteed funds? Because I just want to make that clear to the board that these are monies that we're committing.
An alternate. You can do it or not.
So the anticipation was to have Hanover, since it's such a large project, to be the base bid for next year, with Underhill and Front as bid alternates, as smaller alternates that can be selected. So that would put the town in the position to be moving forward for 2022 with Hanover. You always have the ability when the bids come in, if they come in higher than anticipated budget, to not accept the bids and not award to any contractor.
Right.
But once it is awarded, you are quote unquote locked in for the work on 2020. Now, what would happen is, since this is a unit price contract, if a unit price contract gets either amended to be 10% greater or less than the original contract value of the contract, the contractor has the ability to renegotiate some of their unit bid prices, because they're looking at it saying, well, I had $300,000 for this year and I was expecting $1 million for next year, and you're giving me nothing, then they're going to come back because they're, it impacts their budgeting. So it's in standard EJ/CDC documents that on unit price contracts, if the contracts are significantly amended, then they have the right to renegotiate their unit prices. So by unit prices, I mean they're going to bid on per linear foot of 6-inch water main to be lined, and it might be $2 a foot. They might come back and say, well, we need to do it for $3 a foot because we can't cover our overhead costs, things like that. So those are things that we can discuss once the bids come in, but that's a great question, Ken. And I just wanted to be clear with that to the board. So that's why we wanted to obviously discuss it tonight as the bid documents are being formulated to make sure everybody's aware of the general parameters. And the town attorney I see is on the call. Maybe he can chime in if he has anything else to offer when it comes to municipal bidding.
And that might be an issue with the cost of everything going up for contractors.
Yep. Adam, you want to add?
Well, we can structure the bid documents I think any way we want. So if it's something that the town is uncomfortable with, it's something we should know now.
No, I think we're pretty comfortable with the idea of the work plan as it's been proposed for a 2-year plan.
Right.
We know we get the 2 worst streets done over the next 2 years with the alternates of potentially adding 2 more streets next year.
Correct.
Right. And you formulate the documents so they lock in their price for Hanover for next year, which I think is definitely an advantageous move.
Yeah, and it also, if I can add, Joe, it also saves us on some of the administrative costs because you're not preparing bid documents this year and next year. You're just doing it once, and we're getting, frankly, we're getting two years worth of bid documents in one shot.
Correct.
On this project.
Same thing with some of the construction administration, where if you had 2 contractors, shop drawings, and all the coordination that goes on.
Right. So it just makes economic sense.
Yeah.
And the good part for us is that we know going into next year what the cost is.
Exactly.
And you can put it in a budget.
Yep. We can have our comptroller work her magic.
Yep.
All right, Joe. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Very good. Thank you for your time. Hopefully everybody has enough coffee to make it through. Thank you.
Well, don't you worry.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Good
All
night.
right. Next up, we're talking uniform solar permit. Robin Steinberg's joining us, our town planner, and we have John Landy, our building inspector. I'm not sure if Swaroff's still on for this one. I don't think he needs to be, but this is a uniform solar permit that NYSERDA has in place. This was something that we stumbled upon as part of our CSC accreditation process, and so it is an action item for CSC. I believe it's Robin. Is it a requirement for clean energy community?
No, but it's one of the high impact actions. You need to do 4 of the list.
Right. Beyond that, though, I think there's a more practical importance to this, which Robin and John can present to the board. So, you guys want to take it away?
Robin?
Well, the purpose of the permit is to make you adopting a state standard permit so that all the installers know what it looks like, what's required, what's the process, what the process is. So, Matt asked me to look into this and work with building department to try and see, because you can tweak it a little. We added a bunch of information that they do need that wasn't included. But that's when we ran into the fact that their permit is based on a 25 kilowatt maximum for using the permit, and our town law is at 20.
We're going to have to amend the town solar code to go to 25.
Okay.
Right.
Which is one of the things that we found. But to go back to the actual permit, Joe Venatucci, who's our assistant building inspector, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but Joe oversees most, if not all, of the renewable applications that come in, whether it's solar or battery storage. Basically what happens, the process currently stands, is that a general building permit gets filled out and submitted. Joe reviews it and then requests another round of information. This solar permit, this particular uniform solar permit, is going to eliminate that additional step, because all that information is going to be we're going to be able to receive that all up front into the building department. So it's going to become more transparent, and it's going to be a more streamlined process for people seeking solar permits from the building department.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's like you said, it's more uniform and it's broad across the state. So I've used it in other towns. It's really for residential. That's why it's limited to 25 kilowatts. So it works. It worked very well in other towns.
Do we have to adopt this code and our code, John?
It's not a code. It's just an application.
Just a form.
Right. You do have to actually adopt a resolution stating that you're going to use it.
Right.
So.
You have to do
you want to amend the current solar law, right?
Correct.
And we go from 20, which was in the original model ordinance, to what their new one is 25.
Well, yeah. It was actually went from 12 to 25. I'm not exactly sure how it came to 20, but.
Okay. Anyway, so we're gonna have to amend that code to go to 25. Okay. We can do a resolution next week for the actual uniform solar permit.
Okay.
So you can implement that.
Okay.
Any
Is
questions?
there any dollar amount? Are we going to talk now?
Yeah. You have questions?
Yes, the dollar amount of these 25 kilowatts, home owners fees, how much is it now?
John?
Well, it's based, our solar law, our solar fee schedule is based on square footage, and it gives a 50% discount.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 75, it ends up being 75 cents a square foot.
75 square foot.
Correct.
The panel, how many
Correct.
panels? There's a lot of money, okay?
Well, we have compared our pricing. We've been doing it over the last few days. I've been working with Matt and Joe Vettitucci, and our solar pricing based on square footage compared to other towns based on kilowatts, it's not far different.
Okay.
Not only that, we can give with our solar law, our solar fee structure, anything associated with renewable energy can also get a 50% discount.
Okay.
Right.
Where other towns, if it's by kilowatt, you can't do that.
And the commercial rate is it different? Do you have any number?
It's the same rate.
Okay.
And that information was a product of our review of the solar fees, which our town clerk was very helpful with. So that was a real team.
Matter of fact, Diana Quast was the one who came up with and brought it to my attention that anything associated with renewable energy could also be qualified for the 50%. So thank you, Diana.
That's really great.
Yeah. It made us much more competitive when it came to the fees, which was the impetus of the whole master fee schedule conversation. So it was good. With Diana's help, we were able to resolve that.
Is it all renewable or just solar?
Anything to do with renewable energy can receive up to a 50% discount.
And that comes out of the state law or something, I thought, regarding giving the discount.
Well, that was, it's based upon our fee schedule. It's right in the fee schedule.
Okay.
So the smallest house, residential house, roughly how many square feet, roughly.
They vary. They really vary a lot. It really, there is no average.
Well, you have a 1 acre land or a quarter acre land, how big the house you can put in, just a rough estimate, like that.
The rough estimate for the average cost for solar permit on the average house in Yorktown is about $300, $300 to $400.
It's very reasonable, yeah, very reasonable. Okay.
All right, so we'll do a resolution next week regarding the uniform solar permit. Robin, if that's something that maybe I can ask you to help us out with, just because you've been communicating with Carla.
Resolution?
Yeah. Only because you've been dealing with Carla from NYSERDA, so that would be helpful. And then we also need to just work with you and John on proposing the amendment to the code to go to the 25.
Right, that shouldn't be too difficult.
No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't.
Changing that number.
And you're going to pass it on to Adam because he's going to have to put it in the law form.
That one goes to Adam.
Can I just highlight every time it says 20?
Adam says yes. He said perfect.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you both. Thanks for staying up.
Yeah.
Just an FYI, folks, I was advised that there is or was or still may be going on a working structure fire on Lavoie Court. So, hence our relining project.
I believe it's still going on, Tom.
Is it still going? Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Yep. Still going. And we thoughts and prayers are with those individuals. I know some were hospitalized, so we do wish them well. So we're going to move on to our public officer residency requirement. Margaret Gaspering, unfortunately, is not going to be able to join us right now. Adam, if you can take point on this. Thank you, Robin. This is something that we've discussed with the town board, I think a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to take over from here?
Yeah, I'm just putting the hard on mute. So, as a general matter, public officers of municipalities in New York State have to reside in the jurisdiction they're serving. That comes from Public Officers Law, Section 3, and Town Law with respect to towns, Section 23. You know, there's an analog for the village law, right? Over time, there have been exceptions made to both public officers law and town law. And in fact, because those laws are, special laws, because they've been amended, you know, to certain degrees for certain positions in certain municipalities around the state, town can opt out in some degree, and it's opted out for the controller, it's opted out for the town attorney. But the public officers law has certain restrictions on what positions can be opted out on without acts of the state legislature, et cetera. And so, you know, the question really becomes, do we want to opt out of the laws, seek state legislative approval to opt out of these laws, get exceptions passed for these laws? And if so, how broadly do we want to do that? You know, do we want to do it for specific positions? And if so, you know, well, for example, we actually, Margaret, I think, tried to get a list of positions that we have on the payroll right now that the county would consider public officers, i.e., you know, whether the law would apply and there would be a residency requirement. And she was unsuccessful in getting that. And part of the problem with public officers is, you know, it's sort of, it's not a hard and fast rule. There are a variety of factors that go into determining whether someone is or is not a public officer, such as is the position authorized by a statute or a charter to exercise the power of the local government. You know, generally, a public officer is someone who exercises discretion on behalf of the governmental unit. You know, if duties are subordinate duties, routine duties, you know, you generally aren't considered a public officer. You're more just like a regular employee. Another thing to look at is whether, like, there's some state enabling legislation, like for a building inspector, for example, that refers to the position as an office. You know, that would be a factor they look at to determine whether it's a public officer. But so, you know, if you look at the public officers law and the town law, I mean, a number of positions certainly jump out that are obviously public officers, elected officials, controller, town attorney, building inspector, assistant building inspector, code enforcement officer, town engineer, assessor, water superintendent. So, these positions certainly would fall into that category. And again, the question is, to what degree is the town interested in seeking to exempt these positions from the residency requirement? Really, that's the issue.
I think from the conversations we've had with the town board, we do want to seek that exemption for the residency requirements for where they apply. Something that I believe you stated Westchester County has already done, as have other municipalities, but it's going to require a legislative act. And so, again, this is the public conversation for the town board to essentially have that discussion, to reconfirm the fact that that's the direction that we want to go in, and then instruct our town attorney to begin drafting the necessary legislation in order for us to achieve that.
In my opinion, that's the absolute way we should go. It's just, I didn't even know we were at that point where it still existed. Even in as far as like the building inspector, or it might even take Adam into account. I don't know. Would it take a town attorney living out of town and so forth?
It would, but the town has already passed legislation.
Yeah.
On that particular one. Okay. But yeah, I think we absolutely should act on this and get this legislation done.
Here's one of the issues. I'm not convinced that the state. I won't vote, right? I don't have a say, but I'm not convinced that the state would authorize the town for a full opt-out. The safer course might be to pick the specific titles and department heads that we really want to focus on and petition it that way. Although the county, yes, correct, the county of Westchester itself got a full exemption from that provision. The only thing it requires is that public officers of the county be residents of the state.
State of New York, correct.
Yeah, I think that's the way we should put ours too. Is that any of the officers that are public officers, not police officers, but are registered, are residents of the state of New York, and follow it like that. I can't see picking and choosing at this point, and let's see how it goes.
And the purpose of doing this thing is this allow us to hire people from larger pool of candidates, because they follow within the state laws. So, sometimes you have to get somebody either retire or whatever it is, and, county list is not available to choose for many, there may be there one or two over there, and they have to take an exam and all that. This will allow us very qualified candidate from larger pool of people.
Right. Yep. It also corrects some oversights that may have occurred in the past for whatever reasons. So
yeah, it's interesting, that this reeled its ugly head now. Somebody must have woke up down in the county all of a sudden when we were doing something and pop. Oh, geez, look what Yorktown has not done or has done.
I agree with you, Tommy.
Yeah, it's crazy that the county can run our town like this, but it is what it is until we fix it.
Totally agree. All right, Adam. So we're gonna authorize you to take the next. You're gonna draft the legislation. Is that what you think is the correct course of action?
Yes.
Okay.
I've sort of started, but
good. So then we can move that. We should work with Margaret to make sure that we include the titles that you think that we should include. If we cannot include, a blanket.
Yeah, I think
requirement.
I think what will probably happen is when the bill drafting process begins, we'll get some feedback informally, and we can go from there.
Okay, very good.
Do you want it Friday?
No, I don't. Not that one.
That's already booked.
Busy on Friday. All right, very good. So that concludes that conversation. We're going to move over to Summerfest. We've got thank you, John. We've got Is a member of the Chamber of Commerce on? Do we have anybody from the Chamber, Diana?
Sergio is signing on.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, Serge.
Hey guys, what's going on?
How are you?
Doing well, hanging in there.
You?
How's everybody doing? Good to see you too.
Doing well.
We're good.
So basically, I just wanted to go over Summerfest with you guys. Summerfest is going to be on June 19th. We are actively pursuing the appropriate guidance that we're supposed to abide by according to the Board of Health in New York and the CDC. And so our idea is that the event is going to start at 11. There's going to be at 11:30, it'll be an opening ceremony, which usually lasts about 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And then what we'll do is we'll roll into, at noon, we're going to have Platinum One, which is a reggae band, play. And then at 2 o'clock, there'll be a 1 hour kind of break where we'll have DJ playing music. And then at 3 o'clock to 4:45, Jessica Lynn is going to come in. She agreed to close out the event. And then we'll have some closing remarks. And then the day will be done. We have already signed up several food trucks, several vendors. And we'll be cooking hamburgers and hot dogs in the stand and oh, by the way, it's going to be on the firehouse grounds. So that's where the event will take place. Right now, the idea is, masks are going to be mandatory. We're going to be putting up a way to pre-register. So this way, people that'll come, maybe they could sign up ahead of time, and we could make sure that we have the appropriate number of people at the event. We're going to have several places. We're going to utilize the pavilion and socially distance the tables. We're going to socially distance the booths. And so that's where we're at right now, and we're still planning the event. I do have to submit a plan to the Board of Health in New York, and I'm working on that as well. And I just wanted to see if anybody had any suggestions, any comments. And I think it's going to be a fun event.
The biggest thing that I've, just so the board knows, that I've emphasized to Sergio, and we were on the phone today with the County Department of Health. It's just making sure that we're following the protocol.
That's my question.
That's my biggest thing. And the good news is the Department of Health felt that the event most definitely could go on, but they did provide very specific tasks that Sergio and the Chamber are going to have to follow and find ways to implement in order for it to be allowed. And so, Sergio and I have had these conversations before. This is why he asked to be put in touch with the Department of Health. So there's some reconfiguration, I think, of the setup that was discussed, the pre-registration, the masks, obviously, is an important one as well. Again, this is a very fluid situation in regards to the guidelines because they're changing pretty quickly. So we're hoping for the best, planning for what the guidelines are today, though. And that's what I've tasked Sergio with, to make sure that we're checking all those boxes so that we can safety, of course, is the number one priority for the people who are going to be participating and attending. And so we're working, he is working directly, and we are working directly with the health department to ensure all those protocols and guidelines are being followed.
So Matt, will you have a number in terms of the number of people that will be permitted on those grounds?
According to the guidelines today, right, because that's all I can work on, outdoor events are 500 that are allowed at that event.
Then we're good.
So no, I think actually, depending on, and that's why we reached out to the Board of Health, the depending on where we fall and under what guidance we fall under, there's about 10,000. The issue is that it's very confusing because there's so many different types of guidances.
Right.
So it could potentially be 50% of the occupancy behind the firehouse grounds. And I'm going to reach out to Charisse. She has like a calculator for just this particular thing.
Okay.
So, but I mean, you know, the idea is not to make it a free for all, and to have a safe event that's going to be enjoyable, and that's going to kind of feel a little closer to what we remember as normal. And so that's the idea behind it. And like the supervisor said, it's very fluid. Right now, the guidance is it's pretty good for us to have a decent event where people feel open and free, and can enjoy it safely. And it's come a long way. And I think by the time we get to June 19th, it's going to be considerably different as well. Hopeful of that. But like the supervisor said, we're planning with what we have today, and as we get closer, we'll see what it looks like.
They're still requiring masks?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable.
He told us that today.
You don't know who doesn't have a vaccination. You know, I'm so glad you're doing this because it certainly will help just get us back to feeling a little normal.
Right.
We can at least laugh and say hi to our friends.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate the help with from the town board and the support. You know, this is typically a co-sponsored event. And I really appreciate that's what it is. It is, and we're going to try to, like I said, we're gonna really make a good faith effort. And you know, there's certain things in the guidance that are kind of hard to, like if you're in a group, you need to be in a group that you came in with. I said to them on the phone today, I said, not exactly sure how we're supposed to actually know who came in and make sure they're together, but we'll do our best. And he agreed. He said, no, I understand. He goes, but you know, a lot of the other stuff, you know, needs to be followed. For example, when you sit down, you could take your mask off, you could eat. It's almost like in a restaurant.
Right.
So it's going to be that kind of an idea. But I got to be honest, I think it's going to look a lot different. It looks a lot different today than it did a month ago.
Right.
Considerably so. And Tommy did say that in New York we still have the mask mandate that has to be worn in that type of a scenario that we're planning. So
yeah,
because so many people. Yet the other day, Tommy and I were out and we were meeting with this person. We said, did you get your vaccination? And we were real happy because the person said he had. And so it's like, okay, we can take these off right now.
Yeah, right. You know, so, and I'm happy that, you know, vaccinations are kind of coming around now. You're actually getting these extra benefits.
Right.
And you know, and it's a great way to encourage more people to get the vaccine.
Exactly.
That's because what ended up happening, it kind of petered out, unfortunately, you know, so.
Well, you know, right now there are enough vaccinations to go around where they, you know, they are looking. So, you know, the landscape will probably change again. I know it is supposed to be an advantage to have gotten your vaccination, but to say, well, you have to wear a mask because someone else might not have gotten vaccinated when it's around is a little, you know, is something that they're going to have to wrestle with a little bit with the Board of Health.
I'm going to send you something I sent Matt today, and it discusses that in terms of why mask. The fact that this is airborne, and you don't even have to be near the person who might have a problem.
So anyway, we're going to do what we have to do to the best of our ability, and it started with a conversation with someone who knows. And so that's where we're starting, because honestly, there's a guidance if you're outdoor and it's a high risk. There's a guidance if you're outdoor and it's low risk. There's a guidance if it's an amusement park or a carnival. There's a guidance. I mean, so
what do you under?
we think we believe strongly that we come under the low risk outdoor event.
Yeah, because people are spread out at your, you know, what I remember, they were spread out.
Right. So that's really where we fall. And that really is a good thing for us because it affords us more privileges. You could have more people. You know, it's got to be 6 feet apart. There's still the city's the Board of Health is still at 6 feet here for these types of events, and so we're going to do that to the best we can. And I want to set up 2 areas where you can actually sit and eat. And so and the reason for the 2 areas, we're going to put one on each side, so this way there's always somewhere in the way the grounds are. There's always somewhere where you'll find a seat. And then in the pavilion, you can't really take the tables out, so we'll put a sign on the table, say, you know, this one's out of service or something. And what we're planning to do is funnel everybody in through one entrance. That was part of the reason why we decided to go behind the firehouse, is because we could close off one side. There's 2 ways to get in, right? So if we close off one way, everybody will have to come through the same way, and we could be in compliance. And which is part of the guidance. Part of the guidance is there has to be a one-way in, you know. So that's where we're at, and we're really taking it seriously. But we really want to have a great event, and we're going to do both.
Great.
All righty.
I'm excited.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Good night.
Great night.
Night, Serge.
All right, good night, guys.
Good night, Sergio.
The overlay district topic is going to be tabled tonight. One of our staffers is unable to attend, so we will table that until we may do that next week.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
I did receive a message before, so if it's possible, I could throw something into that spot real quick for the teen center.
Okay.
So I received a message before that the last couple of weeks at the teen center, we've had quite a few teens trying to come in for activities, and they were locked out because of the amount of people square footage wise.
Right.
So there was a request that if the teen center can use half of the gym on Fridays, and I know it's a last minute thing, and I think we have to pass a resolution on it.
Well, I think we have to.
We could talk to that lady who
it's a bit blind right now, so I'd like to talk to Phil Marino and our staff, see if there's anyone who's reserved the gym or if there's any other of our tenants that are using the gym. So I think there's some questions that we need to figure out first, but we're happy to work with the teen center to provide them that space if it's available.
Okay. Is it possible to pass something if it is available that we would be able to work that out for them, providing X, Y, and Z happen? Or
Adam, for tomorrow?
Well, we could pass Friday. So we have
Friday. I'm sorry, Friday.
Adam, do we need to pass a resolution giving them access to the gym, or is that something that we can just work with on the staff level to accommodate?
No, we just work with the staff.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. So if you want to have someone from the teen center reach out to Phil Marino and work through that with him, that's probably the best course of action.
Fantastic.
Okay.
I'll ask Perry Matza to reach out.
Okay.
How many kids were actually turned away, Ed?
It was Perry that called me. She said there were quite a few. She did not give me an exact number, but apparently because in the room they can only have so many kids that they have there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
They've been, and she said she would much rather the whole purpose of the teen center is to give our kids a place to go rather than being on the streets.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
And so they'd be looking for 6 to 9 on Friday.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think anyone's. I think it's fine. You just have them work with Phil to make sure, from a scheduling standpoint, there's no conflicts.
Sure.
Okay. With that, we'll go over to resolutions. We have 3, so we'll go through them. The first recognizes National Police Week. I'm happy to read it. States, whereas National Police Week was established by President John F. Kennedy in 1962, and whereas National Police Week pays special recognition to those law enforcement officers who were killed in line of duty while protecting others, whereas in the United States, an estimated 900,000 law enforcement officers serve our communities, including here in the town of Yorktown. Whereas the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, located in Washington, D.C., lists the names of police officers who made the ultimate sacrifice while in the line of service. And whereas there were 210 officers killed in 2020 who were added to the memorial, and whereas members of the Yorktown Police Department have traditionally participated in the Police Unity Tour, which is a 4-day bike ride to Washington, D.C. to raise funds for the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. And whereas this year, Sergeant Sansone, Sergeant Dillon, Sergeant Rapisarda, Detective Swart, and police officers Kane, Gilbert, Byer, and Vuoso embarked on the 4-day bike ride on May 9th. And whereas this year's team has raised more than $12,000 that will go to support the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, now therefore be it resolved that the town of Yorktown recognizes May 9th through the 15th as Police Week, and be it further resolved the town of Yorktown pauses in its deliberations to remember the officers who have been killed in the line of duty. Be it further resolved that the town board supports and applauds the efforts of the participating officers of the Yorktown Police Department in the 2021 Unity Tour. I have a motion for that.
So moved.
Oh, motion.
Motion, second, all in favor?
Second. Aye.
Aye.
And how about that police officer in the city that
Yeah.
cradled that young lady in her arms and ran her down
Oh
to get
my
her,
God.
to get her fixed? You know, I mean, come on, folks. This is what our police are all about. You know,
she was asked if she knew she could run that fast, and she said no. What a great woman.
Officer Vogel. I remember the name. I know the name because it's my grandmother's name. So
that's right.
Our family name, Officer Vogel. Alice, do you want to read the Asian American Pacific
No,
Islander?
you can continue reading.
I can continue reading. Sure. We also have one recognizing the Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we have a proclamation that reads as follows. Whereas it is fitting and just to recognize the contributions of vital members of our community, and whereas Asian Americans and Pacific Islander Americans have contributed greatly to the growth and heritage of our community, the state of New York and the United States, and whereas Asian and Pacific Islander Americans own successful businesses, are active participants in government on all levels, and have assisted society by making great strides in key sectors including medicine, sports, education, and the arts. And whereas the United States Congress first recognized Asian and Asian Pacific American Heritage Week through a joint resolution in 1978, and later expanded this recognition to Asian and Asian Pacific American Heritage Month in 1990. And whereas in recent months, there has been an inexplicable and unacceptable rise in hate crimes against Asian and Asian Pacific Americans. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the town of Yorktown declares May as Asian American and Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And be it further resolved, the town of Yorktown stands with the Asian American and Asian Pacific Islanders of our community and condemns all forms of actions inspired by Asian hate. And be it further resolved, the town of Yorktown once again reaffirms its commitment to achieving a free and equal society for all members of our community.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hey, Diana, I'm not sure who you caught for the law enforcement one, but that should probably have Tommy reading as making the motion, being he's retired law enforcement.
And I'm aware of who made the motion in second. Thank you.
Okay.
We also have a resolution to authorize the Chamber of Commerce to use the Albert A. Cappellini Community and Cultural Center for a blood drive.
Motion.
Second.
In favor? Aye. And that will take place on Tuesday, July 13th. In addition, the resolution also waives a rental fee of $273.
Yeah.
And there is a blood supply shortage, so anyone willing to donate, please do so. And then lastly, we have two resolutions that have closed regarding personnel. The first, be it resolved that Jeffrey Dalkey is hereby appointed temporary assistant water maintenance four-person job class code 0611-01 in the water department, effective May 17th, 2021, to be paid from Yorktown CSEA salary schedule A group 13 step 5, which is $77,616 annually. And the second is as follows: be it resolved that Joseph Lewis is hereby appointed temporary water maintenance four-person job class code 0610-01 in the water department, effective May 17th, 2021, to be paid from Yorktown CSEA salary schedule A group 14 step 5, which is $80,933 annually.
So moved.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
And that concludes the business in front of the board. I believe that Councilman Diana wants to go back into close, so we will make a motion to go into close and we will adjourn our meeting from there.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, Yorktown.
Good night, all.